Hey guys, Alex here with TFL Bike, and I'm standing here with my new to me 2013 Harley-Davidson 48. I sold my MT-09 and I went the complete opposite direction and got myself an old Sportster. So in this video we're going to walk around it, show you some of the things that have been done to it, and then we'll get it out on the road and talk about what it's like to go from a Yamaha sport bike to a Harley-Davidson Bobber, because that is quite the change. So first off, what is the 48? Well, the name comes from the tank. This is the 1948 style peanut tank. So it's got a tiny little gas tank, and the tank is what drove me to this bike specifically, the 48 model, versus any other Sportster. I love this paint job that they did. They did it in a few different colors. I know they made a green one, they did this blue, and anytime I see one of these in person, I always thought that this tank was just the coolest paint job, and I knew I had to own one day. You can even see Hard Candy Custom on the back here. That is quite the candy looking paint job. Almost looks like, you know, a nice fishing boat or something. So the tank is what drew me to this bike in the first place. But there's a bunch of other things that make the 48 stand out over every other Sportster on the road. One of my favorites is the front tire. This has a really beefy front end, everything from the forks to this really wide front tire, and the spoked wheels, which are part of the 48 as well. I just think it's a really cool look. You've also got forward controls on the 48, and these pretty sweet underslung mirrors that come in under the handlebar. Also really low seat, and a single seat as well. Short front fender, and a big old 1200 Harley-Davidson Sportster engine to get you down the road. So obviously this is not a stock bike. I didn't do any of this work myself, but the guy I bought it from turned it into a little bit of a bobber, and I'll let you know how much I paid for this bike at the end of the video. But a few things he's done, and I'm sure I'm going to miss a few things. He's got this intake on the side here. We've got the super loud exhaust system. They're kind of coated black, and the coating's starting to come off a little bit, which isn't ideal, but the exhaust sounds amazing, which you'll see in just a second. And yeah, it looks really cool too, although it kind of spits out right where your leg goes. Couple other things he did: short kind of chopped rear fender there. He also put on the Springer seat. The front suspension has lowering springs in it, so the whole bike's been dropped down a little bit. New rear shocks as well, I believe, to lower the rear. I think these make the bike a little bit lower. He also gave me a link set too, so if I want to just ditch the shocks altogether, I can put links in there and make it ride a whole lot stiffer. Belt drive. This is the first belt drive bike I've ever owned, so that's a little interesting in itself, and I've been enjoying that so far, not having to lube a chain or do any maintenance. The guy put on these tiny little taillights, which don't function as turn signals, at least not right now. So I'm pretty big on rear end safety. I'd like some bigger lights than that, so I'll probably end up taking those off and putting something else on pretty soon. But for the meantime, I just won't ride the bike at night, because those kind of terrify me, to be honest. Other than that, like I said, I'm sure I'm missing some stuff that the guy did to the bike. It's got kind of a darkened headlight. He took off the chrome ring around the headlight, turned that black. Yeah. And then walking around some other things on the bike, you've got a dirt simple speedometer up here. No tack on this bike, which I think is funny. We'll talk about that a little on the road. And other than that, it's a Harley 48. Let's throw a leg over here. And yeah, coming from a guy who's really used to riding sport bikes, this feels really low to the ground. I've ridden stuff like this in the past, but I've never owned something quite this different from what I'm used to, so I'm still kind of getting used to it, if I'm being totally honest. Let's turn the key on, which is down here on the side. Bike's got 8,737 miles on it, so still very low mileage considering these Sportsters can last a very long time. Going to neutral, start the bike up. And man, that sounds good. Yeah. So, before we even get rolling, one of my favorite parts about riding a big V-twin like this, I'm used to sport bikes. I'm used to motors that rev out very smoothly and rev to the moon. And this is a totally different experience. You just sit at a red light and you shake, and the whole bike is just lumpy, and it doesn't like to idle at all. It just, yeah, it's a different experience. So drop the visor down here, kick it into gear, and take it out for a quick spin. So one thing I'm really enjoying about this bike so far is that it likes to kind of be lugged around town. I'm so used to my MT-09, which I've had for 3 years and just sold last week. That bike really encourages you to ride like a maniac, and it wants you to ring it out. It wants you to quick shift and shift fast. It's a much slower experience, and I really enjoy what it feels like to just cruise around town on this. But at the same time, it's definitely an aggressive riding position. You're not just kind of lounging on this bike. I'm leaned forward pretty far, my feet are out in front of me, and I very much feel like I'm ready to attack the road, which is a feeling I love. This is a big beastly motor, doesn't like revving super high, and I know I keep comparing this to my sport bike, but that's kind of the sport bike I sold, but that's kind of the point of this video. I keep bouncing off the rev limiter on this because, yeah, one, there's no tack, and two, I'm used to revving to the moon, so that's going to take me a little bit of time to get used to. But this bike makes 60 horsepower and 73 foot-pounds of torque, so it definitely cruises. Man, it sounds so good! Pretty much every bike I've owned, and I've owned a lot of them, they've all been dual sports or sport bikes or mini motos. And especially with a job like this where I'm tasked with reviewing all kinds of different motorcycles, I decided I wanted to switch things up drastically for a little while. I'm not sure how long I will keep this bike. When I bought it, the plan was for it to be a temporary kind of bike. I have another motorcycle I've got my eyes on right now that I'd like to purchase, and this was supposed to just hold me over until, you know, in between the time when I sold my MT-09 and when I can finally secure the new bike I want, which still will happen at some point. But I'm going to have a hard time selling this now because I did not expect to love this bike so much. That's just so addicting. Just kind of lugging around town and slowly rolling on throttle. The feelings and the noises and the vibrations you get out of this bike are just unmatched. And a lot of people, when they think of a motorcycle, think of a Harley-Davidson. So I thought, you know, this bike will hold me over until I get my new bike, but also it would just be a great way to experience a different style of riding, a different community. And yeah, I'm just gonna have a hard time getting rid of this one. I don't know if I'm ever gonna be able to say goodbye to this one, because like I said, it's got an aggressive look and it's modified to a point where, you know, you still get comments on it and it doesn't look like every other 48 on the road. But yeah, it's hard to put into words how this bike makes you feel when you're going down the road, honestly. Just feels very American. And yeah, I'm surprised it took me so many years to own a Harley, and a lot of people kind of talk trash on them, especially in the, you know, sport bike community that I'm in, and I think that's very unjustified. The one thing that's weird about this bike is, you know, the little two-finger kind of motorcycle wave you do when another rider's coming by you? Sport bike riders and dual sport riders, a lot of people won't wave to me on this. And I never gave that too much thought, and it really shouldn't drive me that crazy, but I guess the main thing I've learned riding this bike around for the past few weeks is a motorcycle is a motorcycle. If you enjoy to ride like I do, you're going to enjoy riding on basically any bike you put yourself on. And I think a lot of people start riding and they're dead set on one kind of bike, and I don't know, I just think there's a lot of harshness in the motorcycle world that doesn't need to exist just based off the kind of bikes you're into. And as I proved to myself through buying this 48, the same guy can like a Honda CRF 110 and a Honda Monkey for cruising around the neighborhood, can also enjoy an R6 at the racetrack, an MT-09 on the street to commute on, and a Harley 48 makes me just as happy on the road too. So that's kind of the biggest thing I learned, and I'm really glad I bought this bike, because I think that's a valuable lesson. I do find myself, every time I leave a red light, having to look down to where to place my feet, because I am just so not used to forward controls. But especially in this position where I'm leaned forward, you get on a little road with some twists in it, and it hauls. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but the noises and the smells and the vibrations you get out of this sort of ancient motor makes up for the lack of power and speed that I'm used to on some other bikes. I'm also really glad I bought this bike when I did. The 48 came out in 2010, and you know, the new Sportster is out, but the 48 is one of the models that Harley-Davidson killed off, and the new Sportster is crazy expensive. So yeah, I was able to pick this bike up for $6,700, which I think is a pretty good deal considering the condition and the miles and the age. And they don't make it anymore. And the last few years that they did make it, they weren't making it with this cool tank, and I wouldn't have bought one of these with any other tank but this one right here. Love the paint job on this. So yeah, there's kind of just my first impressions on this Harley-Davidson 48. I'm sure you'll see more of this bike since I do own it, and we're getting into some warmer riding months ahead of us, so you'll definitely be seeing more of this. I want to get Case on this bike, see what he thinks about it, but let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments, what you want to see with this bike here, and let me know, have you ever made a drastic motorcycle change like I have, where you go from one end of the motorcycle spectrum all the way to the other end and sell one bike for a completely different bike? Because that's what I did here, and I'm very happy with the decision. We'll see how long this bike sticks around, because like I said, I have my eyes on another bike, and I'll be straight up with you, the other bike is a sport bike. That's where I feel most at home, but this thing is a blast, and I definitely don't want to get rid of it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.